Hey everyone, welcome back to Anvil of Doom Miniatures. I hope you've all been well, and today we're going to paint up an iconic and classic Undead miniature that I was meant to paint for Halloween this year, but unfortunately time slipped away from me, so better late than never. Now if you're a fan of old school Warhammer Fantasy, Undead or Vampire Counts miniatures, you'll definitely know what this one is, and if you're not, you're going to learn today. And it's the Wight King on a skeletal steed, and I've been wanting to paint this one for years now. So anyway, let's get into it. Now, if there's one core memory I have from my youth that's ingrained into my brain more than anything else, it's flicking through some White Dwarf magazines and being blown away by those photos of classic armies all ranked up on the grass table with the little hobby trees behind them. And I vividly remember the wackiness of the Undead army with all their legions of skeletons, carrions, ghouls, and twisted necromancers. It was a sight to behold. The paint schemes were bold and their hand-painted banners were some of the best. And this was mainly because of how many skulls a heavy metal team back in the day could cram on them. Now I have to admit, as great as I thought the Undead were back then, they never hooked me in like some of the other armies did, and it's only in recent years of collecting classic Warhammer Fantasy minis that I've developed a deep appreciation for the Vampire Counts or Undead. I've taken a real shine to them as they have this weird, classic, spooky, Halloween-like aesthetic, and they sort of feel like they belong in an old black and white horror movie, if that makes any sense. The vampires look like classic Count Dracula-like vampires. They have mummies, giant bats, snarling wolves, zombie hordes, and I'm surprised there isn't some sort of Frankenstein-like abomination mini in their range. But in saying that, there probably was one made in the 80s and I should look into it. Anyway, all of these great horror elements make up for a very diverse looking army, as each unit is technically something a little bit different, and that has made me fairly interested in collecting and building a classic Undead army. So I've slowly been chipping away and snapping up some bargains on eBay from time to time, but I haven't really dived into this new project just yet, like I have with my Chorfs, High Elves, and my Avaland Empire army. But I hope that changes next year, as I'm going to try expand the scope of this little channel a fair bit. But the question is for you guys. I'd love to know if more Undead or Vampire Counts projects that is something that you guys would like to see on this channel, so let me know down in the comments below. Now as you can see, this old hunk of metal required a bit of cleaning and prep work before I could slap on the paint, and as the skeleton horse came in two pieces, it was easy to just glue both sides together with some epoxy and then line it up together by super gluing it onto the slaughter base. There was this huge gap that ran down the spine of the horse, so it was time to get the green stuff out and fill it. I find making a sausage then cramming it into the gap is the easiest way to do this, because you can just cut off the excess on either ends with ease. And as this skelly horse's robes were flowing in a downward direction, it was easy to sculpt the green stuff to match up by using the side of my sculpting tool and sliding it in a downwards direction. Now unfortunately I got too heavy handed with this thing and I snapped off its bony tail. At first looking at it, I thought it was a bust because it was way too small to pin with some wire, and if I just super glued it, it would be very weak and eventually snap off again. So in situations like this, I like to hold it together with some green stuff. I first super glue the tail in place, and then using a flattened out bit of green stuff, I wrap it around where the break is, and then I just try my best at sculpting the bone-like shape to the tail. Now it's definitely not going to be perfect, but it's better than having half a tail, and when this green stuff hardens up, it shouldn't go anywhere. Now I had some green stuff left over, so instead of wasting it, I made some small rocks for the base of this thing, and then I slapped on some sand, and these pieces were ready for a coat of Chaos Black. One thing I love about these old sculpts, which I've mentioned many times in this channel before, is that there aren't too many details or textures, which is great because I can keep things simple. After smashing out a few batch paints and kit bashes lately, it's time to take it easy, and every now and then I just like to paint an easy miniature for the channel. I treat it as sort of like a vacation mini where I can get back to basics and beat the burnout. Let's get cracking with the bones first up, as they are in the harder to reach areas on this camel looking skeleton horse, and I'm covering all the bones with dark umber from Pro Acryl, but I mainly want this in the joins or the sockets of this reanimated beast. You could leave these areas black, but to me sometimes black is a bit jarring when it's up against bone or white colors. From here I'm going to cover the skeleton extra carefully with some wraith bone, and I'm leaving all the joins and painting on some little teeth. What I'm going for with this paint scheme is the classic skeleton horses you would have seen back in the 90s, and to give it more of a yellow rotten like tint, so I'm going to whip out some contrast medium and add around 1/6 the amount of skeleton horde to make a light mix. I don't put too much skeleton horde in because I like to apply this mix to the recesses with a few coats after it dries, just to build up the yellow. Now you can keep applying this wash over and over until you're happy with the color, and for me it took around 3 coats and a few more just around the skull. From here I highlight all of the raised areas and where the bones join with a thick band of some Screaming Skull, and to finish I do a spot highlight of some Pro Acryl Bright Ivory. Now, if you're not up to date with all of my videos yet, you'll see that I'm mixing things up lately and throwing in some pro acrylic paints to my recipes, as I was kindly gifted these from the legends at Let's Play Games. And I have to admit, I really love what I've used so far of the pro acrylic paints, and as I make more videos for the channel, I'll introduce these paints into the fold, so stay tuned for that. Next up, I cleaned up the robes with a bit of coal black, and this paint has a great matte finish to it. And then it's time to highlight these things, and on the Wight himself, I'll do some select black panels on the armor and on his shield as well. Now, another thing that has really inspired me to smash this miniature out is the book Zombie Slayer, which I finished a few months ago, and I had a really enjoyable time reading it. Now, I didn't think this was the greatest of all the Gotrek and Felix books, but if you're into zombies, ghouls, and a bit of espionage, this could be the book for you. At the start of the book, it introduces some undead wights hunting down the remnants of a mixed empire army, and of course our heroes Gotrek and Felix across some open land between a forest and the refuge of a huge castle in the distance. The start of the scene has some white riders and wolves appearing from behind the men of the empire in a wooded tree line as they make their final push to the castle after days of marching to evade the undead horde hot on their heels, which was summoned by none other than the lichiest Lichmaster himself, Heinrich Kemmler. The panic that ensues is pretty great as the wights scream from the tree line and pick off plenty of men who are so close to surviving after days of no sleep and food, and of course Gotrek, Felix, Cat, and a couple dwarfs who are prisoners of the Empire at this point in their tale are in a slow cart at the back of the pack that's surrounded by these wights as they struggle to fight them off. It's a great action-packed scene and really highlights how dangerous these reanimated dead ancient men are. They kind of remind me of ringwraiths from the Lord of the Rings in this scene as they screech and charge towards the frightened men. Now, I won't go into the full detail of the whole story of Zombie Slayer, as I eventually want to do a part 2 review of the next 5 or 6 books in the Gotrek and Felix series that I've read so far, as I've already done the first 8, so hang tight, I'll definitely make that video soon. I just want to find the right mini to paint. Feel free to slap a suggestion down below. I hope you're enjoying this video so far, guys, and if you are, make sure you hit that like button and maybe the hype button as well, and also maybe share this video with a mate. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want to stay up to date with all my latest videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, let's get back into it. Now today I'm going to try something different and attempt to make my reds more rich by adding in some Rhinox hide to some burnt red for my initial base coat. I got this idea while I was watching some of Tabletop Tactics Old World battle reports the other day, and I noticed that some of their great painted minis in their Vampire Counts army had this awesome deep rich blood-like color. So my plan is to start super dark and then highlight all the way up using my usual reds. Now I know this looks like I'm doing a lot of steps here, but I'm hoping with enough playing around and adding less and less brighter reds towards the edges of these great big bat wings on this winged helmet, it should give me a lot of contrast and I'll still keep that classic old hammer look. To be honest with you, I don't know if I achieved what I was going after in the end, but it was nice to try something new with my red recipe for once. It's one of my go-to recipes and I've been banging it over your guys' heads and spamming it on the channel for bloody ages now. But what can I say? I just really love me some vibrant reds. Now, after spending so much time focusing on the wings, the little tassel under the horse's chin, and the shield wings, I forgot to paint his cape. There's nothing worse than when you think you've finished painting a color and there's a huge part that you've missed. I'm sure a lot of us have done that from time to time. Anyway, after I finished that, I moved on to the leathers with some warm browns, and then it was time to wrap him up with some true metallics, which basically covered the bulk of this fella. Now, this did make me a little bit nervous because I don't really like when there's a huge amount of true metallics covering a mini, because it can look too much and overwhelming to the eye, but this is generally the case for a lot of old hammer minis, so I'll just suck it up and keep going. Now, while I was doing a little bit of research for this video, I took a look at the new version of this Wight King that's in Age of Sigmar, and you can see how much this old thing has influenced the modern version. It carries the same look through, and I'm pretty happy that Games Workshop honored this old thing. I have noticed that this has been happening a lot more in Age of Sigmar lately. A lot of the classic sculpts or older fantasy aesthetics are getting a modern upgrade, and you can definitely see this with the new Warhammer Quest box that's literally out this weekend. Even though this new version of the game is technically in the Age of Sigmar universe, a lot of these new minis could easily pass for Warhammer Fantasy inspired miniatures, because to me they have a more classic fantasy look compared to that Age of Sigmar high fantasy aesthetic. The knight in this box is very Bretonnian-ish to me anyway, and obviously this is a reference to the old Bretonnian miniature in the older version of Warhammer Quest, and the dwarf definitely feels like he could be one of those old fantasy rangers. Anyway, what do you guys think about this? Am I going crazy? Probably. And to finally wrap this haunted guy up, I gave him a coat of Lead Belcher and Gehenna's Gold. then a wash of Nuln Oil and Guilliman Flesh, and then from here I started layering up the silvers with some Runefang Steel, and then a simple edge highlight of Pure Silver by Vallejo. And for the golds, I gave a coat of Gehenna's Gold and Polished Gold mixed up, and then highlighted up with some pure Polished Gold by Vallejo, and then a final highlight of Polished Gold and Silver to make this guy shine. After this, I simply worked on the sword and gave the crown some gems, and that's pretty much it. Here it is. Here is my classic Undead Wight King. Thanks so much for stopping by, guys. I really appreciate it. And let me know down in the comments what you think of this thing, and also any suggestions of miniatures that you want to see me paint in the future. Like always, I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon members for supporting me and making videos like this possible. If you want to join the Anvil of Doom Patreon, the link is in the bio, and I look forward to catching up with you in the Discord. Anyway, guys, I'm out of here. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.